One of the biggest parts of video games is fighting bosses. Even in Final Fantasy XIV, every part of the story leads to a boss fight. There are the easy ones featured in dungeons, and then there are the others. Bosses that don't need a lead up. They're the only ones in their domain. So strong that a party of 4 won't do. No, you need twice as many players just to take a chance at these behemoths. I of course am talking about primals and other trial monsters. Whether it's mechanics or aesthetics, all the trial fights have something that make them unique compared to all the others. So today, my friends, I want to share with you my top 10 favorite Final Fantasy XIV trial fights. I think it's only right to try to start off strong, at least thematically. While Titan isn't the first primal you fight, I find myself a fan of his fight more so than Ifrit's. Let's start at the beginning. I think it's really cool actually seeing the primal form from boulders into a giant golem. I appreciate how the music has a heavy feel throughout the fight, no matter what phase you're in. There are a few things I don't like, the main one being how often Titan jumps away into space. I understand he's changing phases and that's how he attacks, but it takes away my grease lightning stacks, which I hate, and it screws up a lot of people's combos, which everyone hates. I do, however, love how a ton of his attacks force the players to move, whether by choice or not. With bomb boulders, players have to move or get exploded. That's a choice, but with his pushing skills, Titan forces the players off the battlefield. Since he's a basic trial fight, most people don't fall for it, but it's a really cool mechanic. Titan is also the first to have a trial with no walls, making his arena itself a hazard. He may not be the strongest primal in Final Fantasy XIV, far from it, but he has a very cool fight, and rightfully deserves to be a staple in the Final Fantasy franchise. I love that this fight is made to seem like it's only the single player versus Thornton and his 12 knights. Honestly, it feels like the fight can be soloed because overall, all the opponents are really weak. But the reason I love this dungeon isn't the difficulty. Honestly, the vault is harder. This dungeon has some of the best aesthetics and really unique mechanics. First, the aesthetics. You seem to be fighting in an area resembling a king's court. I think that's awesome since you're being judged by the king. The music also supports the idea that this is a magnificent battle, giving it a really epic feel even though everything dies if you tap it lightly. The best part of this fight has to be the different mechanics. They aren't unique per se, but I like the huge array of them. And even better is the fact that each of them comes from a different person. Remember, this fight isn't just against Thornton, but also his knights, and they all bring something to the fight to mess with you. I especially love this transition. Look at that! You can see the earth! The side of that still gets me. The transitional phases of this fight are a spectacle, and the strongest point of this fight in my opinion. This trial may not be that hard, but it sure is pretty. Nabrialis is the Ossian fight that was done right. Every other one is just weak compared to him, and I had a bad experience playing through A Realm Reborn because of it. I honestly felt like the Scions were losing to a group of weaklings, and then Nabrialis came in. He not only looks intimidating, he can actually back it up. I also like that he's one of the only Ossians that can get to the good part of their main theme, because he doesn't die in an instant like every other one. His worst mechanic for me is the Ethereal Tear. Clearing it is easy, LB3 on a melee DPS, I'm typically a monk so no worries about not having one. The part I hate is that even the slightest lack of teamwork, this part can cause a wipe. One DPS decides to tank meteors, wipe. One tank wants to DPS instead, wipe. Healer's not healing, well that one's just obvious. However, I love the idea of this move, that Nabrialis is so strong that he can pull us into another dimension to fight. That's a cool idea, and honestly the implementation isn't half bad, just really infuriating. The best mechanic though has to be his quote-unquote ad phase. Typically I wouldn't say that, but his has a cool gimmick of keeping track of which vulnerability you have, and working on not stacking it up. Overall, I think Nabrialis is a good end to A Realm Reborn, and fighting him was the first taste I had of a difficult trial. The intro to Shiva is so cool, and I don't mean the intro to the fight, I mean literally her entrance through summoning is definitely one of the more cinematic trial cutscenes. The fight actually feels pretty standard upon getting to high levels, but I think it is the perfect introduction to transitional phases. Though prior trials have them, this is the first that has such a clear difference between the first and second phases, making it easy to understand that shit's about to go down. Shiva doesn't have too many crazy moves, but I do have to say I dislike the markers for her Hailstorm attack. The color is basically the same as the arena and background, so sometimes it's hard to see who has the marker. Otherwise, I think her mechanics are really good, because for a low level, they do provide some difficulty and they'll require more precise positioning than other low level trials. Shiva also has some of the best phase change music. Just listen to it. Not only is the music change awesome, it's cool that Diamond Dust is what signals the change. Like Shiva herself knows that the change is coming, and she wants to make it as epic as possible. Though Shiva isn't the strongest trial out there, she is definitely the coolest. Another trial boss named after a Hindu myth. I'm not a fan of bugs, but the whole aesthetic that Ravana has is really unique to me. Having him use all his hands' legs to hold his swords. He's not only dual wielding, he's quadra wielding. Take that, Kirito. I also love Ravana as a character in Final Fantasy XIV, being a super honorable warrior who willingly leaves once you beat him. There's a few primals who act like this, and it's my favorite trait they can have. There's also the fact that Shiva couldn't beat him, literally. She tries and fails and looks to you, the Warrior of Light, to fight the demon bug god. I always feel really prideful remembering that. Aside from character story, the fight itself is really epic. Let's start with what I don't like, falling off. This fight starts with walls and they break off as time goes on, so if you're not paying attention, the wall you were hiding at may be gone the next time you try to use it for Ravana's Pillars of Heaven. That happens to me a lot, even in this recording. But there's so much to love about this fight. First of all, the music and the connection to Ravana's attacks. Prior to the big face change, Ravana summoned Spirit and Moon Ganas. Gana is the Hindi word for song. That's just a cool tidbit I noticed when I ran this. Aside from that, a lot of Ravana's attacks have to do with parts of a song, like Prelude to Slaughter. Along with himself, the music of the fight is this controlled orchestra. I feel like that embodies Ravana really well, because he is really calm and his attacks are all very systematic, even in animation. Overall, I think Ravana is a great fight and embodies both his trial and his name really well. Okay, so Zurvan being in this list surprised even me, simply because prior to making this video I had only ran this trial twice. I just love the idea of releasing a primal just to fight and kill it. But that leads right up to my least favorite thing about this fight, the beginning where he's locked up. I understand the point and story-wise it's cool, but it feels wholly unnecessary to the fight, as it gets much better when he's in his full form. But the rest of the fight is amazing. Let's start with the music. Both phases of it sound awesome, but I especially like the first part because of the chiptune being more prominent. This part of the fight is also really good because of its mechanics, having a sort of pattern that lulls the player into a false sense of security, leading to an ad phase that actually has other mechanics beside kill the things. And then the ad phase ends, but Zurvan doesn't just return, no, he commands you to freeze, and cinematically slashes through the entire party. This was the first time I saw a truly cinematic phase change that was more like a cutscene, and that was what cemented my love for the fight. The music changes from the calmer orchestral chiptune to a hyperactive rock chiptune, to hype up the player and show that things are serious. After this, Zurvan's mechanics are less controlled, much like the music, so there is no security for the player. Much like the primal, you have to up your game if you want to get through the fight without going down. Zurvan may not be one of the main primals of Final Fantasy XIV, but he will always be the standard I hold all future trials to. I knew I would love the fight with Susanoo the second I saw the tribe that summoned him. Warrior turtles were bound to have a cool primal, and Susanoo lived up to the hype. He's also one of the primals who has more motivation than, I am a primal so we must fight. No, Susanoo is playful. He wants to fight you because he knows you're strong and wants to see you hold up. He's basically Goku. I especially like the music in this fight and how it really embodies Susanoo and the fight it accompanies. To start off, Susanoo is taking it easy, so the song is light and relaxed, playful even. When Susanoo becomes a giant for the quick time event, the song is more serious, with a heavy meticulous sound to it, showing that things are more serious now. The final phase, the music is more frantic and wild, much like Susanoo's new mechanics and patterns. Throughout the fight though, the tune of the song is the same, still playful, because to Susanoo, this is all just a game. On to mechanics. They're all really good, even the one I hate, the Purple Thundercloud. It doesn't even have a name. The main reason I hate it is how hard it is to track, even if you're totally on top of the mechanics. It's really easy to not notice where the Thundercloud spawns, and you might be in the center of it, so you get zapped. Other than that, all of Susanoo's named attacks are really fun, while giving it a fair challenge. My favorite by far is Amano Iwato, which only starts in the final phase of the fight. It really drives home the fact that to Susanoo, no matter how hard he's trying, no matter how strong you are, this is all just a game to him. Nidhogg is probably one of the more threatening bosses on this list. How am I so sure? The first time I tried to record for it, 3 people left before the intro scene was even over. But can you blame them? Even his intro is menacing, showing him standing on Racefelger's head after killing him. The whole fight gives off the idea that this is it, the whole Dragon Song War was led up to this fight. Even the music is a more amplified and epic version of the standard battle music. This trial was also the first proper dragon fight that really made me feel epic and like a legendary fictional hero that people always write about or dream about becoming when they play the Dungeons & Dragons. Sure, we fought Midgardsummer and Hraesvelgr, we even had the fight at the Steps of Faith, if you can call it that. But now there aren't any gimmicks, no wind-up or extra help from NPCs. You're at the final Steps of Faith to fight a dragon with your own power. Now the mechanics. My least favorite in this one has to be the ads. Normally ad phases are nothing and I couldn't care less, but these ones are easy to screw up even if one person doesn't know what they're doing. I've seen plenty of wipes happen simply because one or two DPS didn't know what order to kill things in, or they jump around from ad to ad not finishing them off. But seeing as the ads are my least favorite mechanic, that has to mean that every other one of Nidhogg's mechanics is something cool. I think my absolute favorite thing about him is his 3 forms and the changes to his attacks they all bring. His base dragon form has his usual fire breathing and flying, and an ethereal tear here or there. But then you get his dragoon form, gained from possessing Astinian. His entire kit changes into dives and dashes, and its design is just awesome. Finally, he goes back to being a dragon that looks like all its fire has been brought to the surface. Even the color of the arena changes. In this form, he's much more aggressive, and this is where I see a lot of people panic because, well, large fire dragon. I think Nidhogg is one of the most cinematic trials out there, and fighting him is one of the best experiences I've had during my entire time playing Final Fantasy XIV. Okay, so the first time I did this dungeon, I misread Sephiroth as Sephiroth. I didn't hold one above the other until this fight. Sephiroth is so awesome. Even though his intro is pretty short, I think it's really cool. Watching him be chained up with no limbs, and upon seeing you, he breaks free and has not 2, not 4, but 6 arms! And upon landing in front of you, him poses a terrifying figure, and since I'm a Lalafell, he's even bigger. The music is really unique to me here, because off the bat, it's pretty standard trial music. It's loud and orchestral and pretty great. But after his second phase, it's just something else. It's not some standard music, it's basically Sephiroth demanding that he isn't some trial. This is his fight. He will choose the music that he destroys you to. I especially like that it sounds like Redline, that just makes the fight more epic. As much as I love this fight, my least favorite part is the first phase. It doesn't do anything wrong per se, it's just that the second phase is by far one of the best phases of a trial that I've ever experienced. Even his knockaway attack is impressive. There's no name, no cast bar, you have to just be watching everything with an eagle eye or get swept off the field by a giant arm. Aside from the swipe, there's other things that make this fight different to others. I don't mind that a lot of his attacks don't have names, because they're standard, but they all do one thing that most fights don't do. They change the entire field. Yes, it's just a cosmetic change for the one attack, but it's so cool seeing it happen every time. My favorite by far is when Phase 2 begins and plants start growing out of the stone platform. It just shows how much power Sephiroth gained from being in his giant form compared to his smaller form. He may not be the big bad of Final Fantasy VII, but Sephiroth is definitely one of the best fights I've experienced in the whole Final Fantasy franchise. I mentioned before that I love the Shinryu fight. Let me reiterate. I really love the Shinryu fight. Before we get to the fight, I should explain the main reason. This fight was my epitome of an MMORPG experience. Back when Stormblood first came out, when I got to this fight, I failed a lot. But my partner and I stayed in the same group for upwards of 2 hours. We made new friends, all learning along the way, and cleared this fight after a lot of hard work. It truly felt like a band of adventurers meeting and tackling a world-ending mission together, each having their own reason for being there, but sharing the same goal. I know every mechanic like the back of my hand, and there's no way I'll forget them because I have an emotional connection to this trial. I'm also really glad Square Enix never nerfed it, because this is a level 70 boss of the story. It wouldn't be right for it to be easy. Now, onto the fight. I knew this would be epic before we even entered. The entrance to the Royal Menagerie is a beautiful flower garden looking out onto the locks. The stage is cinematic before you even see Shinryu. And when you do, you know this fight won't be easy because he's already at the size of Sephiroth's second phase, and he's a dragon. He brings a whole arsenal of magic and you have to pay attention to each one or you're dead. The music is as cinematic as the fight, really bringing you into the shoes of the Warrior of Light. The ad phase is the least favorite thing for me here. I actually hate it. It's really easy to die even if you position yourself properly. I can have Riddle of Earth and be full health and be at the edge of the platform, and somehow the eggs will still drop me. It's infuriating and probably the thing I've seen the most people die to, and 70% of the time, it's not even their fault. After this though, that's when the fight gets epic. After the quick time event, you grab onto Shinryu and ride him to a different plane. That's amazing! The first time it happens, you're not ready for him to sweep you off the new arena because he's going full throttle the second you land and you're still dealing with grabbing a dragon. This phase's music takes the first and amplifies it. You know you're fighting the real final boss because this is his domain. He gets even more elemental magic, and now it stacks on top of itself. Not to mention his tail. I hate his tail. The fact that it comes at random, the fact that it breaks blocks, the fact that it took me 6 tries before I realized I could attack it. That last one might be my fault. Shinryu's tail is the only ad he needs. It has the unique mechanic of the ad's HP being directly linked to the boss's HP. That was something I'd never thought of. And beating Shinryu is the most satisfying feeling because, as mentioned before, you beat a dragon, and that is the dream of all fantasy heroes. I know people hate this fight because it takes time, but every time my roulette puts me into the Royal Menagerie, I know I'm in for an adventure. I've been the Owlbear, and with that, my friends, we have completed another task. Feel free to subscribe, like if you liked the video, and leave a comment telling me about your favorite Final Fantasy XIV dungeons. If you want more of me, you can check out my last video, or follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Tell me how your day's been. I hope it's been nice.